I thought I could start off by asking you, how did you become a public speaker?
Well, I am an academic first and foremost. So, I mean, I've been an academic since, well, even before I took my master's, in the sense that I was actually teaching before I before I finished up my master's thesis, and worked in academia ever since. So, in a sense, I was speaking, as in lecturing, from a very young age. And the transition to what you might consider kind of public speaking, keynote speaking, was really an extension of the same. I mean, I was a very young professor. I was 31 when I was first made full professor, so I rather quickly got some invitations and had already started doing a bit of public speaking outside of Finland. And as I then kind of hopped along in my academic career, I started getting, particularly internationally, quite a lot more attention. And I think I was invited as a speaker often because I was young, so I didn't sound like the old fuddy-duddies, and I was a professor, so it gave a little bit of academic credence, and I could make really, really dirty jokes on stage, and that kind of gave sessions a bit of je ne sais quoi. So it was fairly kind of easy transition actually from the academic role.
Yeah, it evolved over time. Like, yeah, makes sense. My speaker wrote about your keynotes having this provocative content. So what's that about?
I actually struggle a bit with that. I mean, my academic kind of career has always been about questioning boundaries. How do we draw boundaries? What's acceptable? What isn't? So, what's strategy researcher allowed to write about? What kind of example should we use in entrepreneurship? So, and sometimes in order to kind of make people see boundaries, you need to cross boundaries. So I asked questions academically about, can we write about drug dealers in entrepreneurship studies? And if not, why not?
Okay.
And I realized that this often kind of gave a certain frisson to speeches. So I started kind of playing around with people's expectations. What can we talk about in creativity? What can we talk about in innovation? Why is certain kinds of leaders seen as more leaders than others? So it was never provocation for the sake of provocation. Sometimes in my early years it probably was, but it was also always about making people question their assumptions and making people kind of see what happens when we kind of get outside of our comfort zone. But I can tell you, it's not always easy being known as the provocative one. Sometimes I can go on stage and kind of people expect me to, I don't know, expose myself or tell truly, truly vicious jokes. And that's not really what I'm about.
Yeah.
And at least not all the time.
So it's not necessarily a label that you like to have then?
I'm okay with it. It's like many things. I was kind of conflicted about being known as the young professor. Those days are behind me, thankfully. Being known as kind of a provocateur has its good sides. You get to kind of test people's boundaries, and you get to do things other people maybe can't. But at the same time, you have to be very careful it doesn't become a shtick, a role, just a kind of an easy trick you play on the audience. There needs to be smart to it.
Yeah, I understand that. I was watching your video on your LinkedIn about that companies should celebrate failures. And I was wondering, what's been your most glorious failure?
Well, there are so many. Which to pick? No, I have lived actually rather coddled life. So I've had few kind of really horrific failures. I do carry with me, in a sense, the fear of failure all the time. I mean, have I written enough? Have I written well enough? Have I been a good enough father? But I believe that's actually a good thing. We should kind of dwell a little bit on failure, and truth be told, the failures I've had, the failed speeches, the times I cracked a joke and nobody laughed, they do follow me endlessly. I can wake up in the middle of the night and kind of think of some time I was embarrassed 20 years ago and still cringe to the point of cramps.
Wow. Okay. Why do you say that companies should celebrate failures?
I think I think what I tried to say there was the fact that if we want companies to truly become all the things we say we want them to become, happy to take risks, innovative, creative, experimental, they need to also kind of embrace the fact that if an experiment cannot fail, it's actually not an experiment. If a creative idea cannot fail, it's actually not very creative. Then we're playing in the land of certainties.
Yeah.
And I was trying to say the company should kind of look at, okay, so what did we learn from this failure? Why might this failure have been good anyway? And maybe not so much to celebrate the failures, because going, yay, we lost $14 million might be a little weird, but
Yes.
still kind of go, okay, so here's Mark. Mark just tried his best and he did this amazing project, but it didn't succeed. But we still think Mark's a great guy. Or Mary is a great gal.
Yeah.
So that was more the thing. We need to kind of also find the things to celebrate in failures.
Okay. Since talking about those, have you seen an impact in companies that they're more maybe visible about the learning experiences from failures?
I have seen some kind of CEOs take those words to heed and kind of try to find kind of things to use as examples from failed projects, and try to talk to project leaders of failed projects and say, okay, how can we kind of spin this, or still kind of say that why this is still something that we should seek joy in.
Mm-hmm.
But one has to remember, speakers cannot change companies very quickly. We normally come and we do our hour on stage or 40 minutes or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the best we can hope for is this tiniest trace of memory, this tiniest little kind of glimmer in the eyes of at least part of the audience.
Yeah.
I believe we have to be humble as speakers as well. We're not changing the world very quickly.
Okay. Good. That's good to know. And then I read you've done a presentation in North Korea.
I have.
Oh,
I was
how was
probably
that?
the first Westerner to keynote on innovation in North Korea, a country where innovation can often be illegal and lead you to be put in a prison camp. So that kind of puts a different kind of tension to keynoting. It was also the first keynote where I was told beforehand where in the audience the people from the security services sit. And it's always handy to know where the spies and assassins are in a room. But it was actually great fun. I was part of a team who were running a startup event, of all things, in North Korea as part of a science diplomacy mission. And in a sense, by opening it, I'd made sure to say a couple of things that made our North Korean hosts a lot more comfortable. So towards the end, my good friend and colleague Muafak Ahmed could even recite the Gordon Gekko "Greed is good" speech to the students, knowing that the security agents had already left.
Okay. What's been your favorite speech of all time?
I can't recall a single speech where I would go. I mean, I can remember many where you kind of go, oh my God, that one I actually nailed. And when I say many, it's like 1 in 20 when you kind of have that feeling that went perfectly.
Okay.
The one thing I love the most is actually a speech I can't even remember any longer. But one day I got a mail from a young woman who said that she'd listened to me talk at their company for about, was 18 months ago or something like that. And she said, and she referenced a little anecdote I'd had about a brewery company.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I can't remember anything else about your speech. But today I was trying to pitch my project again. And when they said no, I just snapped and said, you're just like the people from the brewery company that professor was talking about a year and a half ago. And they got so embarrassed, I actually got to do the project. So I wanted to thank you.
Oh, wow.
And the reason I love that is because it shows it doesn't have to be a perfect speech. It doesn't have to be that they remember everything.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes somebody can take a little part from there, an anecdote, a joke, a story, just a line, and actually use it and achieve something. So that's the speech I'm most proud of, even though I can't for my life remember what else I said during it.
Oh, wow. That's a lovely story. And it's so nice how you impacted her.
I liked it too. Yeah.
And then I asked our community if they had any questions for you, and they do.
Okay.
I got this. And how do you define authentic leadership?
Oh, I think it's really, I think one needs to be really careful about defining it, because authenticity is one of those things that sounds so self-evident and clear for everyone. We kind of all have this notion of who is authentic and who isn't. But the fact is, we're all kind of both authentic and non-authentic all the time in our own way. So for me, the important thing about authenticity in leadership is that people should very kind of not just aim for some kind of iconic vision of what authentic leadership is, but actually accept themselves for who they are, warts and all. So for me, authentic leadership is not kind of something you do in kind of in a moment, but rather that you're the same person with your flaws and your foibles, doing the job of leadership day in, day out, so that the people working with you know how to live with you. They know that, okay, Alf can't handle complex questions in the morning. We shan't put them to him in the morning. Alf is really bad at remembering people's first names. Don't get annoyed if he fumbles with it once again.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about authenticity in leadership, it's not some kind of picture book ideal or some kind of, oh, we need all to become living saints, but more, we are who we are. And we need to accept that and not try to hide that and go and be our persistent selves in leadership.
What a perfect answer. Wow, thank you. Well, then he had, what makes a good leader in the age of innovation?
Well, I've written a book even called the Paradoxes or the Contradictions of Leadership. And in it I've kind of said there is no perfect way. There is no one right way. We are all kind of stuck in being kind of trying to deal with lots of contradictory demands. I think that in our current era, in which innovation is becoming so important, not because innovation is a value creator in the monetary sense, but because there are so many wicked problems and big problems to deal with, not just the pandemic, but aging, the ecological crisis, social inequality, and so on. Mm-hmm. I believe the important thing leaders need to remember is what I call innovation ambition. The desire, or you might even call it purpose, the desire to do something meaningful, not just to look like a leader or gain the adoration of your followers, but to actually, as I believe Jobs at one point called it, make a dent in the universe. So that I believe, and how we do it. In what way, whether we do it by big gestures, small gestures, forcefully or gently and through consensus, that can be then differ from person to person. But we all need to find purpose and ambition in our leadership roles.
Okay, wonderful. Well, would that also be, the next question is, what is the most valuable asset of a leader? I guess that you have a purpose?
No, I actually, because higher purpose I don't see as a asset really. That's something to strive for. Okay. I think the most important asset for a leader is the understanding of the self. That is that we actually know who we are, and that might sound either trivial or a little kind of fuzzy, but I believe that a lot of the leaders I've seen who struggle with leadership, what's fundamental about it is they don't really know who they are, or they don't really have the courage to be who they are. They aim to kind of find certainty through books or courses or mentors or coaches, rather than actually be themselves and kind of acknowledge the weaknesses and the flaws they have. So every great leader I've met has had a relatively high degree of understanding of self. A couple have managed without it and run on pure ego, but most of them have actually been pretty good at knowing where their flaws lie.
Okay, this leads perfectly into his last question, which was, what are the top 3 characteristics of a leader? So I guess the understanding oneself.
I actually have an innate dislike of top 3 lists or top 5
Okay.
lists or top 7 lists.
All right.
I believe there is one of the greatest problems we have in management and business thinking is that we have this desire for lists. We really want to kind of chart everything and give everything these hierarchies.
Yeah.
I believe that leadership is so complex and so multifaceted that what can one day be a very clear top 3 list might next day be completely pointless and without any real value. The situation of leaders find themselves in, they mutate, they live, they're dynamic. So sometimes you might get by on your bravado and your great gut instinct, whereas other times you may need to kind of reach deep down inside and find your empathetic self.
Mhm.
And creating a top 3 list can actually be dangerous in that it can kind of give you a false sense of certainty that as long as these 3 things are with me or I have them under control, I control the situation. And that, I believe, is not how leadership works.
I think that's an excellent point. You would be limiting if you said these 3 things. And like you said, it's changing. Well, Sami Vanni from the community, he asked, what makes an impactful speech?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, speeches can be impactful in many ways, of course, but I believe that the important things of an impactful speech is that it has a key point. The way speakers often mess up their speeches is they try to make too many points. They can't kind of condense it into these are the key messages.
Yeah.
Another is that the impact of a speech actually comes after the speech, as in how do people remember your speech? And here I think there are 2 things that kind of set apart really great kind of speakers. One is they use narrative or storytelling. That can be in the form of a joke or in the form of a powerful anecdote or whatever, because people remember jokes.
Yeah.
People remember anecdotes, as I kind of talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The other is too many speakers use too much energy in the beginning and too little in the end. The end is one of the most important bits of a speech, and you need to kind of be able to land the audience, to give towards the end, give that either a high note, a kind of let's go out and conquer the world, or a more kind of reflective note in which people walk away and go, yeah, I really need to kind of think about this.
Okay.
But if you have those 2, strong anecdotes or jokes, I'm a big fan of jokes, and a good ending, it's likely that your speech has had a decent impact.
I love it. I have 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
I wanted to ask, what is one thing that nobody knows about you?
Well, since I've been interviewed so much, I really need to reach deep down to find stuff that, and I've been fairly open about things as well. One thing fairly few people know about me is I'm atrociously bad as a dancer. I was actually asked to be on the Finnish Dancing with the Stars, but twice, but had to turn them down due to scheduling reasons. But I really truly cannot dance. The other thing is I absolutely hate watching sports. And that's dangerous to say for a Finnish man because we're all supposed to love sports and have a favorite team and so on. I was told that a team won the ice hockey or something, and I always go, okay, who are they? What are that? And how many people are they in a hockey team, really? I am very much anti-watching sports. That doesn't mean I begrudge people who watch it. If they take joy in it, more power to them. But I never got down with the kind of watching athletics.
Well, neither did I. And lastly, what's one piece of advice you would give for someone who's aspiring to become a public speaker?
Well, and here is the problem is the advice one tends to give is the same advice everyone gives. It's actually, everyone says, "Oh, sorry."
It does vary, actually. People do have quite different tips.
Quite a lot of time, it's practice, practice, practice. And then there is the notion of do as many speeches as you can in the beginning to become good at your craft, and both of those are very good advice. To give slightly more unique advice, I think one of the things that speakers don't train enough on is how to move on a stage. We are often given rather big stages, and we're given a possibility to move about on them in a way that creates dynamics and creates a different kind of flair for a speech. Don't be the kind of speaker who just stands in one spot unless you have that as your particular thing. Learn how to use a stage, and if possible, talk to actors and directors. That's what I did to learn how to really be on a stage, and how to make yourself look bigger or smaller or faster or slower on the big stage that speakers often land on.
I think that's excellent advice, and no one's given that one yet. So perfect. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.